Dance to the rhythm, feel the fire within it. Embracing femininity, breaking through. We win, no more hiding in the shadows. Let your light shine, stand tall, be proud. It's your time to rise. Feel the rhythm in your bones, let it set you free. Afrobeat vibes, celebrating diversity. Strong and fierce, we're breaking down the walls, unapologetically embracing our femininity. Standing tall. Freedom in our hearts, liberation in our souls. Raise your voice, let the whole world know. We're breaking chains, take control. In this Afrobeat anthem, watch us go. Watch us glow. Freedom in our hearts, liberation in our souls. Raise your voice, let the whole world know. We're breaking chains, take control. In this Afrobeat anthem, watch us go.
Welcome to the Woman Up podcast, your channel to inspire you to find your voice and make bold moves. Today, we are incredibly honored to have Dr. Kristen Szabla joining us. Dr. Kristen is not only a medical director and neuroscientist, but also a trauma expert and survivor who has turned her profound personal experiences into a beacon of hope for others. Now, guiding individuals through the shadows of trauma towards healing, she overcame sexual trauma and harnessing her pain to foster her own transformation. She's here today to share her story and insights, helping us understand the power of resilience and the pathways to recovery. Prepare to be inspired and empowered as Dr. Kristen Szabla takes us through her journey and her work, offering both hope and actionable advice for anyone looking to transform adversity into a stepping stone. You are watching Woman Up. I'm your host, your friend, Natasha. Woman Up.
Welcome back to the Woman Up podcast, where we amplify women's voices and tackle challenges with grit and grace. I'm your host, and today we have a truly remarkable guest joining us. She's not only a survivor of some of the most heart-wrenching adversities one can face, including incest and human sex trafficking, but she has also harnessed her experiences to empower others. She holds a PhD in neurosciences and uses her deep understanding of the brain to help survivors of trauma and mental illness. She's an international speaker, a profound writer, and the visionary founder of Transforming Pain. Please welcome to the show, Kristen Szabla. Welcome to the show, Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
For people who do not know you, please introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm Dr. Kristen Szabla. Usually go by Dr. Kristen, professionally, but Kristen is fine. So again, I'm a neuroscientist. I am a survivor of sexual violence, including human trafficking, and I'm a writer, an international speaker, and I am a founder of Transforming Pain. And I translate my knowledge of neurobiology into tactics people can use to help them heal and overcome. And it's not really overcoming, because it's making space for the trauma and making it something you can accept and, not have shame around, And it is healing.
Definitely. I really commend you for your journey. Can you take us through your personal journey and what motivated you to pursue a PhD after experiencing significant traumas in your life?
Okay, yeah. So, sexual trauma started happening at a very young age. I mean, I really can't remember a time when it wasn't happening since my earliest memories. And then as I got older, I was basically sold to other people, for purposes of their sexual gratification, but I was sold to people for them to rape me, pretty much. And that went on like from about 3 to 17, 18. But the only thing that I had to belong to was school. I loved school. I was a good student. So I was always like the teacher's pet. So I held on to those things, like whatever those teachers told me, it helped me survive. And then I was a prolific reader. So I always read, and that helped me survive too, because it helped me escape my current, circumstances. And so when I'm at age about 13, I was trying to figure out like things going on at home, me and the brain. I've always been fascinated by trying to figure out what's going on with people, because the guy says something, but they're saying something totally different. So I started reading books about neuroscience when I was 13 years old. And so I've always had a fascination with the brain. And then when I finally got my undergraduate, and I also have a master's in biochemistry, my goal was to get a PhD in neuroscience, because I wanted to, in a way, determine the molecular weight of suffering. And what I mean by that is that all molecules in the brain, which, help the neurons, conduct their activity, have a certain molecular weight. And I thought, which is like, how heavy they are. And so I thought that if I could find a couple of molecules that were, cause suffering, I could find a way to attenuate them and reduce suffering, not only for myself, but for others. But, the brain is very complex, and it's not as simple as just a couple molecules. So I never did find that. But that's why I have always been fascinated by the brain. I wanted to know what made people tick. And but on a molecular level, because I was more of a scientific person than say psychology. I was interested very much in psychology, but the science, I wanted to know the hard science. So yeah.
I mean, this is deep. What did you do between 3 and 18?
Yeah.
So what, you were able to go to school during that time?
Yes. In fact, if I participated in those activities, I was promised I could go to school. That's how it was portrayed to me. And then if I didn't, it wasn't a choice. But if I, made a big fuss, whatever, I was threatened with being homeless and not being able to go to school, not having a home, being on the street. So that terrified me actually more, I guess. I know a lot of people don't feel that way. They feel getting away is better, but I really had nowhere to go. So,
understand. Wow. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced while moving from that trauma, that period of time where you were really in despair, and going from there to being a neuroscientist and a speaker? What were the biggest challenges?
Yeah, the biggest challenge for me was recovering from what happened to me, because even though I was, for all intents and purposes, an adult and I looked like I was functioning, I was actually a scared little girl screaming for help inside of a woman's body, and I had no idea what to do. And so, I've had a lot of therapy. I continue to have therapy because it's a process; it's not a destination. So, and on my recovery journey, so I had to basically, my biggest challenge was learning to reparent my, metaphoric child within, little girl within, and having to deal with the fact that I wasn't parented the way I saw other people being parented. I was very angry at first that I had to do this for myself when I had no idea how to do it. But and then dealing with the fear and some traumatic memories that kept coming up. That was the most challenging thing I've ever done is recovering from what happened to me. It wasn't getting a PhD. It was recovering. So yeah.
Sure. I mean, I can only imagine how the work, like the mental work, how it could have been like so challenging, and on the emotional level as well. So how were you able to building yourself, like if that trauma happens for so long, from 3 to 18, it's growing up, like all your conception of life is all messed up. I could say, if I could say it like that. So how were you able like to find yourself in a woman's body?
Yeah. So, well, basically, I don't know if I'm answering this question correctly, but as I said, I read a lot, and like I was like, from like poetry to everything, whatever I found that could support me and keep me going, I like clung to that. Like I was clinging to the end of a rope. And like, for example, Maya Angelou, other people's writings, Emily Dickinson, and, just other books that I would read, I would like cling to those statements that were written, and it helped me feel understood. It also helped me feel like I could go on, because if somebody else went on, I can go on. But, I didn't understand the how hard it would be, because I thought after I got a PhD, everything's going to be great. I'll be, I will. Part of me wanted to quote unquote prove myself, and that's not important. Nobody has to prove themselves in this world. Everybody is perfect as they are. But so I had to learn that, wow, I really need help, and it was like a lot of help I needed, and it was very frightening when it was when I moved to New York City, and I was like, wow, I feel like a child. I don't know what to do. There were so many days when I was just convulsing in tears on the floor, like holding on to anything I could to keep myself alive. And I was working at Mount Sinai as a postdoc. But luckily, science helped me. What happens is when you do logical things like science, it engages your cortex. And when you're feeling traumatized, your cortex goes offline, and then your limbic system, which controls your emotions, just takes off, and you can't control it really while it's like that. So yeah.
Wow. Could you describe a pivotal moment in your career where you felt that your work was truly making a difference in the lives of trauma survivors?
I would say the first time I felt that was when I did a speech. It was last year, and it was at a speaker salon curated by Trisha Brook in New York City, and I talked about my journey, and also I talked about shame, because shame is a big, huge thing when it comes to surviving any type of trauma. And in this day and age, most people have survived trauma of some kind, because our world is not conducive to, that is not non-traumatizing. So anyway, I spoke about shame and how I was able to overcome shame. Because, for the longest time, I felt like I was wearing a metaphoric scarlet letter, S for slut, like similar to Nathaniel Hawthorne's Hester Prynne, who wore an A. And I thought everybody saw that me as a slut. Like I said, I walked down this third street, I felt like a slut. I thought everybody thought I was a slut too. And that was part of my shame. And so I really discussed how I overcame that shame. And then I also, in that speech, talked about the prevalence of human trafficking. Like it's not just happening like in other countries. It is in our own country, in our own backyard. It happens across all socioeconomic demographics. And I guess people were surprised to learn that. And so I've helped some people since then that heard that story. So yeah.
In your experience, how does understanding the neurobiology of trauma helps survivor in their healing process? Can you explain a little about the science behind it?
Absolutely. So, like I said just a little while ago, that when we're like like when we're panicking, for example, our cortex, which is the front brain, like when you're thinking of like when you're taking a test, you're using your cortex, right? But when you're feeling afraid, this this part of your brain called the amygdala is like overactive, and it like leads to fear responses, tears, crying, all that kind of stuff, because it causes it triggers the release of all those hormones like cortisol and adrenaline and things like that. And in my experience, if people understand why they're feeling that way, they don't feel like they're crazy. They're like, oh my gosh, it's a real thing. I'm not just going crazy. It's like my actual physiological system that happens to be started in my brain, but it goes throughout your body. It's a real thing. It's not like I'm going crazy. And, if we can understand that, then we can do things to reverse it.
And your initiative, Transforming Pain, employs a unique approach. Can you elaborate on the methodologies you use and why they are so effective?
Yes. So what I do is I have a 6-month program for people right now. And basically what it does, it's like based on a workshop series. And each month is one workshop in the series. So we start off talking about, what is trauma? How does it affect the brain and you? And we discuss that. And then that can be helpful for a lot of people who don't know that, because there are many people who don't know that in this day and age. And also what's interesting that really helps people is people don't realize that shame is perceived by the brain as a threat, as if you were actually getting attacked. So it causes like that whole traumatic response over and over again. And so once you learn that, you can say, okay, what can I do differently? So basically, and then we talk about superpowers and strengths, and how, because in order to go into trauma work, you really have to know what are my strengths? Like, not only my personal strengths, but I have strengths in certain relationships. I may have, strengths, my spirituality or religion or whatever they may view as their spirituality practice. And then we go into like containment. What that means is that I help them learn how whenever memories come up, like intrude upon them, they are put in a container of their choice. They can actually make a physical container and like maybe write whatever it is down, like a word, and maybe tear it up and throw it in there, or they can just throw it in there, and or they can make a container in their brain. Like, for example, I made a container in my brain to help me feel safe. And that helps people because you can't go around with trauma going around in your mind and be able to function. So it's necessary to put it somewhere. And that if you'll be able to talk to somebody about it, like in a couple days, like for example, me or your therapist or whoever, you just take it out, open the container, and then, talk about it there. And then we put it back in the container and close it up, so we don't have to, it doesn't circle around. And then also what I do is, I go through how to close the door on suicide. And what that means is that, a lot of people who've experienced significant trauma have suicidal thoughts and ideations. And so we talk about strategies or techniques, how to come to the realization that no matter how suicidal I feel, I choose life and I choose the permanence of hope. And, for that, I use a lot of symbols because the brain functions better on symbols than, say, lots of words. So for me personally, my symbol for hope and holding on is the sunflower, because it always looks to the sun. So it reminds me to try to find the light when I'm in a dark place. But symbols, it differs for everybody what their symbols may be or what their strategy may be. And then I talk about trading shame for self-compassion. And we discuss how when a person practices self-compassion, it is a practice. It's like a daily practice. And part of practicing self-compassion is, listing gratitudes every day, listing affirmations every day. It's kind of like learning to suffer with yourself, but in a loving way. And it's actually been shown to change brain physiology. It releases more this peptide called oxytocin, which makes us feel connected to humans and things like that. So, and the other, like gratitude and affirmations, combat the brain's what's called negativity bias. And all of our brains have a negativity bias, no matter what we've been through. So we want to have positive things go in every day so we can combat that. Even people who feel like they're fine, gratitude helps get you places where you may not think you're going to go.
I love that you touch based on shame, that you touch based on positive affirmation and gratitude, because it's been it's a famous, it's a trendy exercise. But
Yeah, sure.
I like that I'm speaking to a doctor and not only a doctor but a neuroscientist that could tell me that could tell us actually a bit more about the positive affirmation, because we could say that, but in the practice sometimes we don't feel like it's either resonating or it's does some kind of impact. Some days we have high, we have a low, sometimes we don't feel it. How important it is to have a daily affirmation exercise or even a gratitude journal.
Yeah, it's very important. Like for me, when I was going through the worst times of my recovery, when I was feeling my absolute worst and I didn't want to write a gratitude at all, I wrote them every day. I wrote out 10 gratitudes every single day, no matter how bad I was feeling. Every single day, I wrote down 3 good things that happened that day, no matter how horrible of a day I thought I had. You have to find the positive, especially when you're in the early stages of recovery. Because I will tell you, recovering from traumatic events is difficult, and it's a journey. It's not going to happen like in a couple of weeks. And it's not linear either. You go back and forth. Because you might be talking about some different aspect of what happened to you. Or and maybe you have shame over that, so we go through all that again. We talk about self-compassion over this specific thing. And interestingly, I don't know if you're familiar, but I know you're familiar with Oprah. Everybody is, but she says she didn't have gratitude once she got anything. She used gratitude because she was grateful, and practiced gratitude is how she got what she got. So it's a very powerful thing because it really helps you believe in yourself, and it really does change brain physiology more than we really know currently. I mean, it's not been proven. Nothing's proven in science, but it's definitely can really put that. And also, what it does is it puts your cortex online. It's because you have to think about it, and if you write it down, it's even more real. And then if your cortex is thinking, you're not going to have as many emotional feelings or memories come through when you're going through this process of recovery.
Interesting. I know some of my listeners, they went through some kind of similar events. And now that, it's been like maybe over 30 years that it happens, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm not diagnostic anything, but I mean, the hurt and the trauma, they are still carrying that with them past 40, past 50. I mean, is there any hope for them? And
Absolutely.
What can they do? Because, like me, I could say it's possible, but I mean, what, in your perspective, what are your tools, and what can they do to overcome or have that shift in their brain?
Yeah. So first of all, no one's going to be able to do it alone. That's one thing. You need to have a person that can basically keep you accountable, and also basically if you're talking out loud and you're feeling so ashamed and everything, you need to have a person to say, hey, this was not your fault. The shame is not yours. You're carrying somebody else's shame. And also, you know, basically you have, you know, what I used to do is, in order to be held accountable for what I did, like the gratitudes and this and that, I emailed it to a therapist, or I emailed it to an email that just went to myself, because that way I could read it over and over again from way back when to currently, and I can see how I've changed. And that's really important, to have a record, because you may not feel like you're changing, but you are. And but the thing is, when you're 40, 50, 60, whatever, however old you are, it's not going to change unless you choose to basically open that door of possibility. It's a scary thing to do. I understand completely, but it's a door of possibility. And, you know, everybody deserves to feel joy and contentment in life. And what happened to you in the past, you know, we don't want that to prevent that for you at any age. And, you know, they can contact me, and I can certainly, talk with them, and, you know, with their specific situation, because everybody's different, and, you know, help them find a way.
I'm loving that. Thank you so much for letting us know that it's possible and there's a way out even after all those years, you know? I think it's difficult at a certain age to have like that, not capacity, but I have that thought that to encourage yourself to say, oh, you know what, it's time to free myself. I deserve better. To have even those, just having those thoughts is sometimes it could be a challenge, you know?
Yeah. And also, I really do believe in the power of hope and love. Love heals. And so we need to learn to love ourselves. And we can do that at any age. At any age, we can learn to love ourselves.
How do we provide love with those people? How do they receive love?
They receive love well, some of them have a more difficult time receiving love because they become jaded by what has happened to them, and maybe because of what happened to them, maybe they made certain choices along the way that they don't like, or got them in places they didn't want to be. But basically, it's consistent. It's consistent. You offer unconditional love, no matter what they say, what they do, what they said they've done. It's unconditional love, because you know what? When people are acting out their trauma throughout their life, the second half, and if you don't deal with it, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like that's all they knew. And, you know, if you don't know better, then how can you do better? But then once you know better, you'll do better, you know, and there's no judgment in that. And you know, there's no judgment in anybody who's experienced anything like that. So, I mean, I don't judge. I never would. Anybody who, and even if they told me their darkest secret that they thought was the worst thing that has ever happened to them, I don't judge. I have never heard anything that I felt like I needed to judge, because I know what I went through, and I thought I was going to be judged, and I luckily wasn't, you know.
Wow. It's a big one, like the fear of being judged, just like for anybody. So I can only imagine the challenge, the fear of being judged when we go.
Oh yeah,
through it's a real thing. And honestly, this past year I've learned not to be judgmental, like towards anybody, towards myself, but more about and have that compassionate, being open. So I'm really being intentional with that, what you just said. I can't.
Yeah, great.
Really. What are some common misconceptions people have about trauma and its recovery process that you often encounter in your work?
Misconceptions are that trauma cannot cause medical illnesses. It does. Trauma is associated with the development of like autoimmune diseases, cancer, obesity, diabetes, and a whole host of other things. So, you know, having unresolved trauma living in your body can actually activate certain disease processes that, you know, are not good for us. So, you know, if you want to be healthy, if you want to live a long life, you really want to deal with your trauma because, it's hurting you even if you don't think it is. And also misconceptions are that, of course, you've heard this before, that people who have had sexual trauma, they're making it up, they're lying. But you know what? I have not met a woman or a man who's ever made something like that up, because why would you want to? It doesn't make any sense. So that's can be a misconception in our society still. And also a misconception about trafficking is that, hey, it only happens to runaways or to the migrants coming in our country. But no, in our country, it happens all over the place. It happens to Black people, white people, Hispanic people, you name it. And actually, Black, Hispanic, Native American women or girls, they're more likely to undergo sexual abuse actually than white people are, even though it happens for a lot in the white population. Mm-hmm. And also, as I'm sure you know, and some of your listeners know, that this kind of thing is the most underreported type of a crime. So we don't know the real statistics. It happens so much.
It's crazy. I'm happy that you've been able to share it, because those communities are likely to be in denial of those traumas, or even mental illness.
Yeah, and it actually can trigger mental illness over time, because it's you feel so badly about yourself, and then you can become depressed, or you could have a panic disorder because you're constantly panicking. Because what happens when we have trauma, like say I'm at work and my boss tells me to do something, and okay, I'm a little anxious about it, like a person that had not went through childhood trauma, they're a little anxious maybe. What happens to me is I go through the whole panic attack, trauma, fight, flight, freeze response, and I tell myself, okay, I have to learn to tell myself, this is not my feelings are not congruent with what's happening right now. I've done this before. I can do this now. So, that's something I've had to go through over and over again to make sure that my feelings in the present are congruent with my present reality rather than being affected from the past.
As we are wrapping up, can you tell us, how do you see your work evolving, and what is your legacy? What do you want people to remember you for?
So I want to evolve my work such that I generate enough money to create resources to meet unmet needs. That's what I really want to do, because there are so many unmet needs for people. And so people of any kind of socioeconomic situation can have quality care, because it's so hard to find quality care if you don't have money.
Right.
And so that's what I want to be my legacy eventually, is to develop these resources so anybody can have the quality care they deserve.
That's very inspiring. Thank you so much I want to thank you, Doctor, for your presence again, for coming, for your time. I want to thank my audience for tuning in. Whether you are in the car listening, whether you're at home just under a blanket, it's been a pleasure to record this for you guys. Until next time, woman up.